And so we started looking into this, and they said, hey, there's this guy called Tony Tetro, who's this huge art forger in America. He's in jail now, but when he gets out, go look him up. And so I did some investigation, and I kind of found a lead, and I ended up meeting Tony. And it was kind of funny because we met at this kind of swanky place in Newport. And he had all these people around, he was smoking cigars. Everybody knew him. He had a bunch of cronies around him. He was talking about all his Ferraris and stuff. But the reality was that he was broke on his ass, and he was living in a motel. His room was literally next door to a Chinese restaurant, and he walked across the street, because he was really kind of down and out. But somehow we had hit it off. And, within a couple of months, like, he gave me pretty much all of his stuff related to art. He just gave me boxes of stuff. He was like, I like you, I like what you're doing, and, knock yourself out. So that's really how it started. And then over the years, I would hear more and more and more about Tony. He'd kind of open up more and more about everything that happened. And, it ended up that I knew him for like 20 something years. And so I kind of, it was funny because he would start to tell a story, and he just go, Giampiero, you tell it. You know better than I do. I kind of knew everything. I knew where all the bodies were buried and all that stuff. So, fast forward to 2017, really, he started doing some work for this, crazy, coked up billionaire guy named James Stunt. He started doing some work for him. And, he started telling me about it. And I was like, well, this is weird. Who's this guy? What's he doing? And Tony said, well, I'm doing like 10 or 12 things for him. He wants to put him in this mansion. He had the biggest mansion in California. It used to be James Stunt. It used to be called Candyland. And Aaron Spelling, the producer, built this house for his wife, Candy. And it was this huge mega mansion. And Stunt married the heiress of the Formula One fortune, Bernie Eccleston. He married the daughter, and so he got all this money. Wow. They bought this house, and now he calls it Stunt Manor, because he was a little bit of a, narcissist. So anyway, he, as far as Tony's concerned, he wants this artwork, Picasso, a Van Dyke, a this, a that, for his house. Well, these guys get to be friends, and, they talk at night. Stunt's up all night, doing drugs and stuff. He's awake, calls Tony in LA, because Stunt at this time is back in London, calls Tony in LA, and they talk about art, cars, women, whatever. And so Stunt says, hey, I want you to come to London. Well, Tony goes to London, and he shows up, and Stunt is kind of on a bender. So he's up all night, and then he sleeps all day. So Tony's just hanging around by himself. And Stunt's nowhere to be seen. So Tony is going to the British Museum with the bodyguards, take him to the pub and like showing him a good time because he doesn't know what else to do. Anyway, he comes down one day, and he's at the table by himself, and there are these papers there. And he's like, well, what's this? Because he's got nothing better to do. Nobody's there. He's by himself. He starts looking at him, and on these papers, which are some kind of legal contract, some kind of contract that has something to do with a place called Dumfries House, he sees paintings. And the thing with Tony is these paintings are unique individual paintings. They're not copies. So 99% of people think that forgers copy paintings. They don't copy paintings, because if you copied a painting, you'd just be like, it's fake. The real one's at MoMA,
Right.
So it's a work that an artist might have done, maybe in the style of, for a certain time period, using the color palette and subjects of a certain time, right? So it's an individual new painting that you create sort of a backstory. Here's why this exists.
Right.
Here's how this just showed up out of nowhere, like the Lost Leonardo, for example, right? Here's an excuse for why this exists.
Yeah, and isn't it with typical pieces of art like this that there's a historical chain of custody that's written about, and you can corroborate it with other literature that goes back into however long ago.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. So there are a lot of people who can paint perfectly. Okay, you can go get a perfect copy of something. There's a village in China that everybody there works making exact copies of master works. Wow. So you can get that, right? However, what Tony's genius was that he was extremely passionate about the backstory of the art, the details, the minutia. So there's a great example, which I talk about in the book. And in a 17th or let's say 18th century expert book about Rembrandt engravings, there's a footnote, page 78. There's a little footnote and it says, hey, so-and-so said that there was a drawing of this, and so-and-so says that there's not a drawing of this. Nobody's sure. Well, that's really all you need to now go, hey, I'm going to make that maybe drawing exist. I'm going to bring it into being. So, of course, you have to execute it perfectly with all the right materials and all the right technique and the period and everything. Wow. Yeah. So then now you've created a new piece that never existed or maybe existed but is lost. And you have the back history supporting why it exists.
Yeah,
right?
But how does he know that somebody doesn't have that already existing in like a private collection?
I mean, it's a risk you take, but you assume it's been 350 years. If it's going to show up, it would have shown up, So Tony, going back to the loan that he saw, so he could see that these paintings on the contracts, they're mine. They're absolutely mine. These are new paintings that I made. They're my subject. They're mine. Why are they on this document that is going to Dumfries House, some royal Scottish thing? So he goes, this sounds a little fishy to me. He takes out his cell phone and takes 3 pictures, right? When he gets back to LA, he goes, hey, Giampiero, I was just in London and this funny thing happened. Take a look at these pictures. What do you think? And I look at them and I go, very fishy. They're loans to Dumfries House. And Tony had told me it was like Prince Andrew or something like that of the British royal family. But Dumfries House.
So this billionaire guy on a bender was loaning money.
Was loaning artworks.
Loaning artwork.
To Prince Charles into his royal collection. And so I go, well, the f is going on here? And he had mentioned something to Tony. He had said something about like, I'm going to do a loan and I'm going to get all this money, but I'm not going to have to pay it back.
So he explained this whole thing to Tony.
He didn't explain. He just kind of mentioned, he just kind of briefly mentioned like, this thing is going to kind of happen and I could make a bunch of money on it.
Got it.
And Tony's like, well, it doesn't make any sense to me and whatever. So he shows it to me and goes, what do you think? And I go, okay, well, Dumfries House is Prince Charles, the future King of England's headquarters of his charitable foundation. It's in Scotland. He's got all this art in it and everything. And I'm like, okay, well, why is he lending money? That doesn't make it, or why is he lending art to this thing? And how do you make money off it? Doesn't make sense. And the first thing that I saw was these artworks had crazy values, like $50 million for a Picasso that Tony had made.
And he was claiming these were originals.
Claiming they're original. He's like, I'm lending
even
this
the Prince, Picasso Prince can be worth lots of money, right?
Yeah, Prince can be worth, but not like that. I mean, this
not
is
$50 million.
$50 million is an oil on canvas major piece, right? So it's a major piece that's going to this foundation. He lent it, right? And go, what's going on? I look at it and I go, well, this is clearly there's something fishy here. They're not just fooling the people at Dumfries House. There's something fishy here because, for example, the Picasso said that it was verified by the Wildenstein Institute. The Wildenstein Institute only exclusively looks at French Impressionists. So they'll look at Renoir and stuff. They would never look at a Picasso. They would never verify a Picasso. They just don't. That's somebody else, right? So I go, there's no expert could have looked at this and accepted a provenance like that, an authentication like that. Then there was a Monet. You know the famous water lilies, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's these famous water lilies. There's a major water lily. It's worth, I forget what it was exactly now in the contract, 30 million, something like that. And it has a date of 18, I want to make, it's been a while, but let's say 1890. And I'm like, well, that's could never pass muster either, because that garden where the water lilies are and that Monet built specifically so that he could paint these paintings wasn't built until 10 years later. So you're like, you wouldn't even have to be an expert to go like, this is bullshit. And it's really like a pretty bad, it's a pretty bad mistake. So this told me this did not go to the curatorial staff. Nobody really looked at this. Nobody really went, what are these things? This went to somewhere else.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so these contracts were signed with a guy called Michael Fawcett. Michael Fawcett was Prince Charles' right-hand man, like literally his right-hand man. When Prince Charles broke his arm, he was putting the royal toothpaste.
Name sounds familiar.
Yeah. He's putting the royal toothpaste on the royal toothbrush. I mean, he is as close as you can get. Mm-hmm. And somehow he's in this scheme with Stunt. I can't prove it, right? But he's in the scheme with Stunt. So I look at this and I go, this is a big story, 300 million pounds, $300 million worth of art going into the Prince's collection, the future King of England, the future owner of the royal collection, one of the greatest art collections in the world, is full of fake art.